of Kittens and Broken Things. Chapter 42. The hospital was in lockdown. Rex arrived, and there were more cracked ribs that were worth it. He took over, and she became superfluous. By the time Kara made it back to the Normandy, she was fizzing with ideas, wanting to learn Solarian as well as Geth, a little upset at herself for not learning it before now. She headed straight to her cabin, and when Sooth didn't show up soon after, contacted her by Omnitool. "Ready to go?" "We are ready to go." "Come on up." "We cannot." "What? Why?" "Thane Krios has made it clear we cannot." "What did he say?" "You are injured and require sleep." "Well, I... that's not his decision." "Are you injured and do you require sleep?" She didn't want to lie, but she didn't want to not lie because she... The hesitation went on too long, and the flash plates on Sooth's head looked like her eye was narrowing as she said, "You are injured and you do require sleep." Thane chose that moment to enter the cabin with food. "Tell Sooth I'm fine and I can study." Thane shook his head. "I will not. You are not. You will not." "This is Commander Shepard's stuff." "This is Commander Shepard's stuff that will wait. Thank you, Sooth." Sooth's plates were still narrowed, looking somewhat betrayed at Kara considering lying to her, which made Kara feel guilty, which made her feel irritated. Sooth cut the connection obediently. Kara narrowed her eyes at Thane. She threw up her hands. "I'm fine. I need to do my job." He placed the tray down carefully and said, "You have done your job. Now you will eat. You will rest." "I'm not tired." "You will be, if you sit down for a reasonable length of time, long enough to eat." "Fine. I'll eat, and then I'll learn Solarian." Thane closed his eyes for a moment, and then said with obviously gathered patience, "Kara, you are injured." "I am not." That was the wrong answer. He was moving, and then she was moved, and that happened so fast. Dizziness, with his forearm across her collarbones, holding her against the wall. She was too shocked to struggle. He wasn't angry, but he was done arguing. Shock flush spread over her skin, and her ears had a tinny whine to them, knees wobbly, mind whining and wobbly. He stood straight, not leaning in, his arm not hurting her, but even when the sudden shock faded, she didn't try to struggle. His other hand pulled at her shirt, and then his fingertips were along her ribs, and she was back to renewed shock flush immediately. His expression was not exactly a smirk, but he had made his point, his fingertips finding a patch of warmer and raised skin due to bruising and swelling. He didn't hurt her, but if she'd struggled, it would have hurt. Self-inflicted. Beware the self-inflicted, Kara. It's in his eyes. He said calmly. "Cracked ribs. Here?" His hand found one spot and demonstrated the extent of the injury by circling it with a fingertip. "No help." "And here?" His hand shifted to the other side of her ribs, finding another tender spot and pointing it out, and "No, really, help?" she asked, more curious than angry, and definitely ignoring how his hands felt on her skin and the way it left tingling trails of venom and warmth. "How could you possibly know that?" He gave a particular drill smile that always meant humans in general were stupid. "Okay, maybe not all humans. Her." "I heard them, Lassam." Erdnot Rex was enthusiastic in greeting you. Twice. "They're just cracked. They're not broken. I can breathe. They're not that painful. They'll heal on their own. Stop doing that." He blinked, double lids, the fingers on one of his hands spanning the extent of an injury, caging one tender spot. I will stop when you are reasonable. You're probably going to be waiting a really long time then. His hands moved from across her shoulders and withdrew from under her shirt, and she breathed a sigh of relief, or as much as cracked ribs would allow. Yeah, they hurt. Not enough to go to the med bay. Not enough to slow her down. He seemed to disagree. He smiled down at her, his hands trailing down her arms. He entwined his fingers with hers. He leaned in and looked down at her, not pressed to her, but very close. She looked up and said informatively, not defiantly, informatively, I did just fine as Commander Shepard, you know, before you got here. I can do it again. You died. I am attempting to prevent that from happening. She tried to shake his hands loose, but that was not going to happen. Kara, you are being unreasonable. You need to eat. You need to rest. You need to heal. She narrowed her eyes. You don't get to use the long-suffering, drill patient voice when you have me pinned to a wall. He sounded less patient and more determined. Perhaps not, but I still retain the benefit of you having no authority while I have you pinned to a wall. She considered how much truth was in that statement. Themes of de-escalation and self-inflicted injury spinning in her oxygen and balance-deprived mind, venom working its way into her system from where he had touched the skin over her ribs, his fingers twined with hers, the pulling undertow of induced trust and suggestibility. He could, in fact, make her do whatever he wanted. But he wouldn't. It would shatter her trust in him, and he would not risk that. There was a line, and he would respect it, or he knew she would kick him out. He wanted her to do something reasonable and had pointed out where she was lying to him. He'd earned the right to that. He had built trust on purpose. He had made promises that were unsolicited, and those meant something to him. Trust and truth was what mattered here, and he could threaten her, but he would not carry through on any physical expression or force. She was certain of it. He would not kiss her. No, that isn't a bad thing. I think that help would be great. He would not place his hands on her body uninvited, in new places, holding hands, breathing in her ear, doing what he'd done at Beckenstein, proving she was injured. That was his limit. He'd only make her think he would cross a line or provoke her to cross it herself. Yes, he was a liar, and he was underhanded, but he wouldn't undermine his own will, his own promises, the trust he'd built. Not over this, anyway. Plus, Edie was watching. He could get away with venom at the apartment, but he wouldn't attempt assault here. Intuitively, she didn't think he'd kiss her unless she very specifically and distinctly asked him. He wanted to be invited. He wanted her to want him, and she did, but he wanted her to be the one to close the distance between them. And was she tempted? Oh, yes. He wanted her to ask herself that question, just like Garrus had suggested to her that she press him. She did not hold the physical or moral high ground here. He did. He'd watched over her, stayed awake longer than she had, managed her job for her, still served on the squad, everything she needed without complaint. This was his only complaint, and it wasn't for his good, but hers. The only high ground she'd have. De-escalation had to be managed a particular way, or this would happen again, if it was proven to work. She smiled brightly and squeezed his fingers with hers. I have all the authority I need. I suppose if Rex is allowed to break my ribs, you're allowed to hold my hands and check for injuries. Sometimes I wonder, though, why I let Adrel talk me into this whole thing. He bent his mouth to her ear and said, "You need me." His voice was so not fair, so very not fair. What he said was true enough. He was using his body to get her attention since words had failed. Done. She was attentive. Body and words in combination definitely worked. He was going to get her into bed one way or the other. Sleep or sex resulting in sleep, but either way would be up to her. It was a very effective approach, and he was right. Not about the authority thing, but about the rest thing. She said in concession, his breath near her ear and her spine about to give out, supported only by the wall and his hands. If she breathed too hard, she'd be pressed to him. I do. That's the reason why. I'm sorry I have been unreasonable. Thank you for showing me the error of my ways. I'll get some dinner. I'll get some rest. He said in her ear, "Good." And the spine-tingling attraction and hand-holding and being pinned and being flushed and being exhausted but too wired to feel pain collapsed in on her until she slumped with laughter and stress and feigned relief and thinking how obnoxious he was and how much she'd really like some more venom. No, you wouldn't. Yeah, forget about the help thing. Go for the venom. That would help. She said as a compliment to his patient voice, her condescending voice. You're doing a great job, Thane. I mean, I don't want you to think that you're not attractive. You're definitely attractive. Don't feel bad. He moved his eyes to gaze at hers for a long moment that had her trying very hard not to allow trembling knees to affect the rest of her. He narrowed his eyes and tightened his hands in hers and said, "Kara, all in or all over." She dragged air into her lungs, long and slow, controlled, to be able to say, "You're not a bad-looking guy, Krios. Don't feel that way. I mean, it would definitely work on me if—" He laughed, captured her face in both of his hands, tilted her eyes to his, and said, "Don't. I'm approaching being willing to be expelled from the Normandy for assaulting her commander." She leaned up on trembling tiptoe and kissed his nose, said, "No, you're not. Don't feel bad. Some woman someday will want you. I'm sure of it." He looked about ready to kill her, and appreciative of the fact, conceded the bluff and let her go. He indicated the food. "Eat, Kara, before you what?" "I'll think of something. Eventually." She saw only one tray. "Thane, when was the last time you ate something?" He tilted his head to consider, and she said, "You didn't get dinner for yourself." His brow ridges raised as though to acknowledge the observational skills of Commander Obvious. She said, "Stay here. I'm getting you tea and fruit. Go to the med bay and get Dr. Shakwas to look at your ribs." Boundaries. Redrawn in bold. Insist. "Tea and fruit." "Yes, Lassam." He never rolled his eyes, but his vocal response indicated they were rolled to the maximum, metaphorically. "Be back soon." Once she was out, she slid down the closed door to the floor and hyperventilated there for a little bit. She was getting to bed on time. Oh, her hands were tingling with venom, and she held them against her throat and pressed in. I love you, Garrus, but that is an attractive man, and I am not going to lie about this to myself, and I'm going to get to bed on time because, yeah, that can't happen again. She went to the med bay and got it confirmed that her ribs were only cracked. They were fixed in 10 minutes. She refused painkillers. She was back to the cabin with tea and drill fruit that she kept stocked for him in the galley. He was exactly in the same place. She handed him the tea and then offered the fruit. She said, "Tell me more about drill food, please. I know you only eat fruit, but I'd like to learn how to prepare it." His lips curved into a soft smile. "Thank you, Lassam. That is a long discussion." "Is it the wrong fruit?" "That is not the concern." "Okay, then whatever the concern is, tell me later. You've gotten less sleep than I have. Thank you for everything you've done with Soothe. Is the tea okay?" He took a sip. "That is a long discussion as well." "I've watched you make it. Show me where I've gone wrong." "You have not gone wrong. Thank you for having your ribs treated." "How could you possibly know that?" "More long discussions, Lassam." "Looking forward to it. In the meantime, though, I need to get some rest." His smile was warm. "Indeed you do." "Don't be obnoxious." "I am certain I do not know what you mean. I was agreeing with you." When they made it to the Citadel, Thane asked her politely to allow him to escort her to the apartment with the words, "It is not merely for show in this case. Lassam, there is a sizable contract to take your life. The Citadel is a common destination of the Normandy. You will be watched. I have arranged for shadowing security. Goliath is at the apartment already. I thought perhaps you could spend some time with him. He has been looking forward to meeting you." "Sizable?" "There was a prior contract for 1 billion. The offer has been raised to 2." "What happened to the 1 billion contract?" "The agent attempting it turned up mysteriously and extravagantly dead." "Thank you." "You are welcome." "What will happen to the agent taking the new contract?" "Unknown as of yet. At this point I believe the most prudent thing is to discover who is offering the contract." "How do you do that?" "I go hunting." "Can I help?" "As the target, you can help by remaining safe and predictable. Remain at the apartment, travel to the tower securely. Security is sufficient and always has been in those corridors of interaction while you are on the Citadel. I will take you to the apartment. Goliath and the counselor and I shall use the concealed exit. We may determine who has taken you as a target from tracking who attempts to follow or observe. Discovering the contract holder will be more difficult, but I imagine not impossible with the resources of a concerned counselor and a concerned shadow broker. I shall remain a concerned Shepard. There is much that already concerns you, Lassam. Allow me to manage this, so it does not become a crisis." "A 2 billion credit contract isn't a crisis?" "Not if managed properly." "How long have you known about this?" "The first contract was submitted before you asked me to join you. I became aware of its significance after the fact. This contract was submitted shortly after Trireme. You make no unscheduled appearances, you never leave the apartment. There is only a narrow corridor of engagement between the Normandy and the apartment, or the Normandy to the tower that can be exploited by an assassin." She smiled. "You use me as bait? Well, thank you." "You are welcome. Should I go armored?" "That is not necessary. I will be with you. Obvious vantage points will be monitored, and any interested party will be detained." "So why tell me now?" "I imagine you would be insulted if I did not suggest you and I be seen publicly. I will not be able to provide you with a suitable diversion from your bond to the counselor, as I had promised, while this contract is active. Until I determine the potential for this contract and future contracts, I am afraid, Lassam, you must be confined. I did not wish to insult you by neglecting to ask to take you to dinner or to dance." That declaration was delivered with wry humor and appreciation of her absolute joy at being allowed to stay at home and not have to go out to dinner or to dance. But now she kind of wanted to go out to dinner and to dance, though he hadn't mentioned it before. He was so right, and she needed him. Didn't know how much, didn't appreciate how much. Complained the entire time. Maybe not the entire time. Too much of the time. She took his face in her hands and smiled at him, looked in eyes that were too disciplined to be startled. "Thank you for my life. Thank you for showing me my history. Thank you for my future. Thank you for the quality of my life as I do my job. I do not deserve you." She pulled his face down and kissed the black patch in the center of his forehead, realizing that's where Garrus's mark was. Now she probably couldn't look at Thane without thinking of it as her mark. That he'd like that. That she wouldn't say it. That he'd know. He gazed down at her after she pulled back, but didn't let go of his face. He said, "And I do not deserve you." She let go of his face, and he smiled, turned, and took her arm. They walked off the Normandy, arm in arm, and she wasn't frightened, not uncomfortable, only grateful. She asked, "So I'm alive because of you?" "Several times over." "Thank you for that." "They were good?" "She was excellent." "I'm very lucky." For someone who came back from the dead, that would seem to be obvious. "I tell you now also because the first contract I was able to monitor and end on my own. This contract will be more problematic, as I must locate the contract holder, and I suspect that will lead unpleasant places." "Unpleasant how?" "The timing of the contracts are of concern. Your return would for most people be a subject for celebration, and I must ask myself whose interests you threaten by opposing Reapers." "Yeah, you'd think everyone would benefit from that." "So, Lassam, consider. Whose interests do you threaten?" "Slavers?" "That has always been a concern in your career, and there were no contracts. The amount also is an indication of the contract holder." "Well, can't be the shadow broker anymore." "Unless Liara is also much better at her job than suspected. Lassam, I will involve Liara, and I will involve Counselor Vicarian because I fear the amount and motivation will lead directly to the Solarian Counselor." "What? Why?" 2 billion credits is a great deal of money, Lassam. They would be buying something of more value, something assured by your absence. There are few things of more value than influence over the council. With you suspected to be the bondmate of a counselor, having secured a seat for your own race, and having placed Anderson, with them both gaining the support and vote of the Asari Councillor, with you now involved in reversing the genophage and empowering Krogan interests. Lasam, you are a direct threat to the authority of the Solarian Union's influence upon Citadel politics and galactic direction of material and attention. I do not believe this is limited to the Solarian Councillor. The Dalatras, any other councillor, they would all must oppose you. I cannot conceive of another source of abundant credits, malevolent intent, and need to control influence. Your discussion on Tuchanka regarding the genophage solidified my concerns. Thane, you can't kill the Solarian Councillor. I can. You shouldn't. There we disagree. Something we do often, and well. I have informed you. I will inform Councillor Vicarian. I will inform the Aratisoni, and they can help check my logic. Between us, we will follow the influence, follow the money, and make our choices accordingly. You need not concern yourself. Thane! Lasam. I will also tell Councillor Vicarian, because if you become impossible as a target, he is the next most likely as the keystone holding together the influence block of the hierarchy, the alliance, and the Asari. This is not only about you. He must be warned. You must be prepared. I intend to make you impossible to reach as a target. He must make himself so. He is your bondmate, Lasam. I will not permit harm to come to him if it can be prevented. Wait, what if... She thought for a long moment. He gave her time, not prompting her. What if we can get the Solarian Council seat eliminated? What if we can prove everything? The contract, the Yogg, plans against humanity, and potential genophage? Kill the figurehead and we get a new figurehead. Expose the corruption. That would be a glorious thing. You don't think I can do it? I do not think I can stop you from attempting it. You cannot stop me from eliminating a figurehead who richly deserves being eliminated. My way will be much faster. My way would be longer lasting. Then good luck to us both. And if I order you to stand down? That would be charming and idealistic and a terribly Kara thing to do. And you would not carry through. You would bluff, and then I would withdraw my arm until the threat was removed, and then you would accept me back into your service because you need me, Lasam. Clearly in ways you do not even know. It's occasionally very irritating that you're so smart, Thane. I have an echoing concern regarding you, Lasam.